Three world powers are arming themselves to combat a weapon system the Chinese Communist Party is developing.
This is the shock value. It's a shock weapon.
A $95 million arms sale from the U.S. to Taiwan to help defend the island from missiles. It's the third purchase under the current president. Back in the spotlight, organ harvesting in China. A new study by a top U.S. medical journal adds new evidence to the accusation against Beijing that it executes prisoners for their organs. Shanghai extends its lockdown, but loosens a controversial policy that separates kids who test positive from their parents. And for those watching our full episode, food shortages persist under strict stay-at-home orders, but residents are starting to break the rules. That's as authorities weld doors shut to keep people inside. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Pentagon is on the move. The U.S., UK, and Australia are boosting their defense capabilities against China. The three world powers say they plan to work together on developing hypersonic missiles. Here's more.
New development on America's security pact with the UK and Australia. The countries say they're working to develop a hypersonic weapon system critical to modern warfare.
Working together, the best technologists, best defence industry, the best of our defence forces, ensuring that each of our capabilities is being raised.
The announcement comes months after China tested hypersonic weapons that could pose a threat to the United States. Australia's Prime Minister points to the urgency.
The paramount goal is to ensure we get that capability as soon as we can, and it's in the best form that it can be, working with our partners.
He says hypersonic weapons are an important part of modern warfare.
They are one of the key technologies of combat in the future, and the long-range strike capability is a critical part of our defence as set out in our Defence Strategic Plan.
Australia has been wanting to shore up its long-strike capability. That's as the country is becoming increasingly concerned with China's military expansion. Last November, after news broke that China has been rapidly expanding nuclear warheads, Australia's defense minister warned that every major city in Australia, including Hobart, is within range of China's missiles. Just a month before Australia's warning, China's hypersonic weapon test was setting off alarms in the Pentagon. America's top general Mark Milley called it very concerning. Milley also noted China's testing is close to a critical turning point, adding it has all of our attention. As for the hypersonic weapon system itself, how could it make America vulnerable?
It means you launch a nuclear weapon or any kind of weapon into space, into orbit, and it stays there. Then you tell it to come in and destroy something. And it can come from any direction. So missile defense or preparations don't work against it. In fact, there's almost no warning time. This is the shock value. It's a shock weapon.
And the U.S. is not the only nation concerned. Prior to announcing the hypersonic weapons development, Australia said it would pour over $2 billion into upgrading its missiles. Its defense minister says there's a potential of conflict within the region within a couple of years, adding Australia should be realistic about that threat.
The U.S. has approved a new arms sale to Taiwan, valued at up to $95 million. The Pentagon said on Tuesday that the sale aims to support the island's Patriot air defense system, used to counter missiles. This as Taiwan has complained about increased military pressure from Beijing. The communist regime has been trying to force the democratically ruled island to accept its sovereignty. The U.S. does not have diplomatic ties with Taiwan, but is bound by law to give the island the means to defend itself. The contract hasn't been signed yet. Taiwan said it expects the deal to take effect within the month. This would mark the third U.S. arms sale to Taiwan under the Biden administration. South Korea is looking to better its defenses too. The country faces threats from two communist neighbors, North Korea and China. Both of them have nuclear weapons. To combat them, a nuclear sharing plan may be up for consideration. South Korea is seeking a change in how the U.S. deploys its nuclear bombers and submarines. That's according to what an advisor to the country's president-elect said Wednesday. Talks on the subject reportedly occurred during a visit to Washington. That's when foreign policy and security aides to Korea's incoming president met with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol is set to be sworn in early next month. The new president seeks to deter North Korean aggression and mapped out his foreign policy strategy after winning the election. That comes on a background of flared tensions with North Korea after the neighbor launched a new intercontinental ballistic missile last month. Yoon's plan features the deployment of U.S. bombers, aircraft carriers, and nuclear submarines. During the trip to Washington, the South Korean delegation's leader spoke about coordinating efforts with the U.S. And both sides explored ways to extend nuclear deterrence against threats from North Korea. The talks are also aimed to secure an early summit with President Joe Biden. And it's not just South Korea. Japan is also hearing calls from its ruling party, focused on setting up a nuclear sharing agreement with Washington. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said open discussion of the subject should not be considered taboo. The top U.S. military officer told representatives on Tuesday that the United States is now facing off against two global powers, Russia and China. He also said the potential for a global conflict is increasing.
Hard to defend.
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin appeared before the House Armed Services Committee in their first testimony before Congress since Russia invaded Ukraine.
We are now facing two global powers, China and Russia, each with significant military capabilities, both who intend to fundamentally change the rules-based current global order. We are entering a world that is becoming more unstable, and the potential for significant international conflict between great powers is increasing, not decreasing.
Representative Alyssa Slotkin brought attention to the fact that our Department of Defense is still dependent on China for some supplies.
DoD is doing its part. This is especially important to us as we look at components of our critical weapon systems that use microchips, that use critical materials, strategic materials. We want to make sure that we are not vulnerable.
Right now, the U.S. Department of Defense relies on China to source lithium batteries. That's because China dominates global manufacturing of the power sources. Lithium batteries are widely used in electric vehicles, smartphones, laptops, and other electronics. Over the last decade, the Chinese regime has been repeatedly and credibly accused of killing Falun Gong practitioners and other prisoners of conscience for their organs. Now, a new study published in one of the top U.S. medical journals can be added to the mounting body of evidence. Here are the details.
A paper published in the American Journal of Transplantation on Monday lays out evidence that doctors in China removed organs for transplants from living humans and killed them in the process. According to the study, the authors reviewed thousands of Chinese medical publications written by transplant surgeons on heart and lung procurement. They identified 71 papers published between 1980 and 2015, in which physicians describe removing an organ from a donor without first performing a required test to establish brain death. The report states that declaration of brain death is a standard requirement before removing organs from a donor, which in these cases wasn't done. The study also notes that Chinese doctors ceased publishing such papers after 2015. In addition, the report found other irregular practices which indicate the surgeon's subjects were still alive throughout the procedure. Research co-author Dr. Jacob Levy says this shows, in the words of the physicians themselves, that they prioritized organ procurement over adhering to the most basic medical oath, first do no harm. The report also points to the unusually short wait times for organs in China as further evidence that organs are removed from live victims. The study builds on mounting research from groups like the China Tribunal, an independent tribunal that determined in 2019 that Beijing was forcibly harvesting organs from prisoners of conscience. The tribunal further stated that Falun Gong practitioners have been one and probably the main source of organ supply. Uyghur Muslims were also identified as victims of the practice.
Shanghai is extending its citywide lockdown. The strict measures were originally set to end Tuesday. But just before lifting that lockdown, Shanghai reported 17,000 new cases of COVID-19 Tuesday, marking the fifth day in a row the city had a new high. But due to the Chinese regime's tight control over what information is released and its history of underreporting virus cases, that number may be much higher in reality. On Wednesday, the city launched another round of mass testing for residents. Meanwhile, Shanghai authorities partly walked back a highly controversial policy, the decision to separate COVID-positive children from their parents. On Wednesday, a Shanghai health official said guardians of COVID-positive children with so-called special requirements could apply to escort the sickened kids, but added the parents must sign a letter acknowledging the risks. The official did not give specifics on what special requirements qualify or how parents can apply. Stuck under Shanghai's lockdown, some locals decided enough was enough. A video clip started circulating online last weekend, capturing a crowd of residents breaking out of their quarantine compound. According to the person who shared the video, the residents just wanted to leave the area to buy groceries. Another similar clip was posted on Monday, showing people rushing out of a quarantine site. The man who shot the video gave more details. He explained that the building has been under lockdown for 4 days, adding, quote, "There's absolutely no food. People are starving and cannot bear it anymore." The situation appeared to escalate soon after, involving both a crowd of protesters and local police. In the clip, a man can be heard saying the police want to arrest people, but people won't let the police do it. Next, we'll take a minute for another question from our viewers. One of them asked, does state-owned mean something different in China than in the U.S.? Chinese state-owned companies operate a lot closer to home than many realize. A number of them are listed in the U.S. stock market, like the Beijing-based energy company Sinopec, also known as China Petroleum and Chemical Corporation. The same is true for companies like PetroChina and CNOOC Limited, officially named the China National Offshore Oil Corporation. They or their parent companies are controlled by a special department under the Chinese Communist Party. It's called the China State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission. One of those companies was already kicked out of the U.S. stock market, but the other two are still bringing in profits from American investors. Inside China, all large-scale companies in infrastructure and other critical sectors are either owned by the Chinese state or under the Chinese Communist Party's control. That's true even when the companies appear private in name. Take Chinese conglomerate CEFC China Energy as an example. President Biden's son Hunter Biden was previously accused of making transactions worth millions of dollars with the Chinese company through his firms. CEFC was private in name but hired numerous high-ranking former officials from the Chinese military as top members of its leadership. The company has also been deeply involved in Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. Its CEO publicly admitted that the company's overseas businesses serve the Chinese regime's strategic goals, like spreading the Chinese Communist Party's influence throughout the world. It's worth noting all Chinese companies must, by law, hand over any and all data to the regime when asked. That's in the name of China's national security, though it's the regime that defines what does and doesn't concern national security. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program on YouTube. That's after being demonetized for a year. Full episodes can be watched on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up for a 14-day free trial, please click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you tomorrow. No more phones, cars, or computers? That's just one area Americans could feel the impacts if Beijing was to wage war on Taiwan.
For too many Western politicians and politicians in the Indo-Pacific, Taiwan is an afterthought when it should be at the forefront.
Why is this tiny island thousands of miles away so crucial to not just America, but the world? In this special report, we look at how Americans' daily lives would be affected if Beijing decides to launch an invasion and attempt to take Taiwan by force.
Every once in a while, something comes along so masterful, it leaves you in awe. So inspiring, it changes your life. So beautiful, you wish it would never end. When that happens, it's something not to be missed. Shen Yun, an all-new production every year.
The performance was enchanting.
I feel better about the world. I feel uplifted.
It touches you. It really does.
The expertise of the dancers was really, really strong.
To know that it was live music was really fantastic.
We didn't want to miss this.
Make sure you see it.
Have to come. Life-changing.